The Entrepreneur's Library, episode 157.
Welcome to the Entrepreneur's Library, the only book-centric podcast that reviews all the top-selling business books and shares authors' perspective firsthand. This is your resource to finding the next great book that will enable you to grow personally and professionally. Welcome your host, Wade Danielson.
Welcome back to the EL. Today we have Tim Stevens, author of a brand new book, actually just came out a couple of days ago, Fairness is Overrated. Welcome, Tim, and thank you for joining us on the Entrepreneur's Library.
Hey, so glad to be here, Wade.
Before we take a deep dive into your book, Fairness is Overrated, will you take just a moment to introduce yourself? Tell us just a little bit about you personally.
Sure. So I spent my first 9 years of my adult life working for a nonprofit organization and was able to kind of stretch my leadership skills there. From there, I went into a very small startup local church that had just kind of begun going, was meeting in rented space, and I was able to jump in on the team. And at the time, we had 5 others on the team, I believe, and was able to kind of see it grow over the next 20 years. When I left, we had about 5,000 people attending. We had 130 on staff, so I really got to kind of learn a ton about leadership at different sizes of the organization. And as we grew through some years that were very fast growth, other years that weren't so fast, and lots of opportunity there. And then most recently, just in the past half a year or so, I've joined an organization called the Vanderbloemen Search Group. And we get to come alongside churches and nonprofit organizations and help them find staff.
Excellent. Well, Tim, thank you for sharing that. Now let's jump right into your book. Fairness is Overrated. And correct me if I'm wrong, because I get burned looking on Amazon from time to time as far as the release date. Did it just come out January 6th of this year, 2015?
Yes, that's right. It's been out about 3 weeks.
Okay, out 3 weeks. So brand spanking new. Fantastic. So Tim, our whole goal here today, and this is why we're going to move quickly, but our whole goal is to help that our listener / future reader get a great idea of what your book is all about, and answer the questions that they have over your book. And the first one is, what was the inspiration behind writing Fairness is Overrated?
Yeah, thanks for asking. A couple things were there. One was just my own leadership journey, my own leadership growth. So being able to kind of pass along some principles that had served me well over the years that someone along the way passed to me. And the second thing was in my responsibilities at a church for 20 years, had lots and lots, hundreds of businessmen and women in the church that were trying to figure out ways to lead with integrity, to figure out how to, be aggressive as they start something up or as they launch a product, and yet maintain their personal integrity, their personal values. And so really wanted to address that as well, because that's a tricky thing to do, and I don't see a lot of people writing on that.
So what would you say makes your book different from others regarding the same or similar topic? I know you just touched on it, but maybe we can go a little bit more in depth.
Yeah, I think probably, I read a lot of leadership books too. Probably one thing that makes it different is it's just really highly practical. I'm not a very good theorist. I'm not a very good academic. And there's nothing wrong with books that contain theory or that are academic. They just don't work for me so much in my daily life. So I tried to make this book very reachable, very easy to implement. Case in point, the chapters, there's 52 chapters, and they're all fairly short. I think the longest one may be 4 or 5 pages. Most of them are maybe 3 pages. And that is so someone can work through it in small chunks. I told someone the other day, if they said they don't really read books a lot, I said, just put the book in your bathroom next to your toilet, and probably over the next 2 or 3 months, you can read a chapter every time you're in there. You'll get it done. But it's just very short, quick, easy to implement chapters. There's 2 questions at the end of every chapter that could be used either for individual growth or for a group that goes through the book together.
So Tim, based on the way you designed the book, how would you suggest the reader engage with it? Is this one they can jump in, jump out as they need information, or did you really design it to be read from front to back?
I think it could be an either or, and I've heard back from readers that have done it both ways. So it's definitely a book that could be a reference, could be something you put on your shelf and you pull out for times when you're getting ready to hire, or times when you're going through a crisis, or times, when something specific comes up that you're working through, maybe layoffs or things like that, other things that I addressed in the book. But I've also talked to many people, in fact, in this first month that it's been out, many people who have just started at the beginning and gone straight through it. So it's definitely, I've got four kind of big categories in the book I'll talk about in a few minutes, but it's definitely one that you can work through. And probably the biggest feedback I've gotten are groups that have gone through it together, where a leadership team or a board or a staff meeting where they'll take a chapter, they'll take 10 minutes, read the chapter before you come to the meeting, discuss it for 10 minutes, and they do that, they can, have a year full of weekly talks in their meetings.
So Tim, now that we know the background, a little bit of the purpose behind the book, let's take a deep dive into the content itself. So we take the next 5 to 8 minutes and really let the listener know what they can expect to get out of your book.
Yeah. So I've broken this down into four big categories. And to me, these are intentional. They're big categories because they're the huge portions of what is involved in leadership. And I wrote this book not just for the CEO or the director of the organization, the primary leader. I wrote it for every leader at every level in the organization, from the person who's just starting up and maybe just has him and his wife, or her and her husband, all the way to the person who's running a large organization. And even for the parent who has 4 kids at home and they're definitely leveraging influence and leading, there's takeaways for that man or woman as well. But I broke it down into 4 kind of big bucket sections. The first section is being a leader worth following. And to me, that's kind of where it starts. Because if you don't have like a basis, a character, a place of character, of integrity from which you lead, then the good chances are it's going to unravel, that when things go flying and the business is growing and blowing, that things could potentially come unwound in your personal life, and you don't have the infrastructure, so to speak, personally, to be able to maintain the level of leadership that you'll be called to. So in that section, I talk about living a life with margins, just making sure that you build space in. I talk about being a lifelong learner. Don't get to a place where you stop learning and you stop growing. Then you'll dry up. You won't have anything to offer. I talk about guarding your family and paying attention to your marriage and your children, and how that's really going to be great leaders, I think, are able to manage not just their daily work life, but also manage and have a great family life as well. They're able to find that balance. So that's the first section. The second section is about finding the right people. And a lot of volunteer organizations, nonprofit organizations, they would be looking for volunteers. A lot of businesses, other organizations, they think about this as finding staff. And I think there's just several things when we're thinking about finding the right people that probably aren't normal. My first chapter in that section is called A Resume is Worthless. And I just really kind of break down and talk about the fact that resumes really contain very little of what's important to me when I'm hiring staff. And I've had the opportunity to hire hundreds of staff over the years, and now I kind of get to do it for a living as far as helping organizations find staff. But a resume really contains little of what I want. Doesn't mean it's completely worthless, but it's pretty much worthless. One thing that I think employers don't lean into enough is social media. My kids would call this stalking or creeping. When you take advantage before you ever bring someone in for an interview we call it do a social media scrub, where you're going through their Instagram and their Facebook and their Twitter, things that they have put out there about themselves, and looking for things that are important that will determine their future productivity as an employee at your organization. So I'm looking for the kind of pictures they post. I'm looking for the articles they link to. I'm looking for how they treat people, even people that disagree with them politically or religiously or in any other way. How do they treat them? Do they still treat them with the same way you would want your customers to be treated? So lots of different ideas under finding the right people. Section 3 goes into building a healthy culture. And boy, you can have the right people, but if you don't really pay attention and keep your eye on culture, it can become toxic very quickly. And so there's probably 10 or 12, maybe 14 chapters, topics under building the healthy culture that I think are really important. A couple of them I'll just mention. One is, as leader, whether you're leading your team or leading the whole organization, is you have to make a commitment to believe the best about your employees, about your staff members. When accusations come or when people kind of question their integrity or question their work habits, you have to believe the best, and you have to speak that into your employees all the time. Another one is you have to let your leaders lead. You can't just give them responsibility you have to give them authority too. A lot of times as leaders, we give away responsibility. We want them to do the work, but we don't want them to make the decisions. And that's disempowering. And great leaders that have the capacity to become even better leaders won't stay long in an organization where they're not allowed to lead. And then the final section in the book is called Leading Confidently Through a Crisis. If you think back to great leaders over time, they're usually known by how they led in a crisis. You think of some presidents that you don't even know their names, you can't even remember them if you've been very far removed from having to memorize them in school. You don't remember them because they led through a time of peace. No one really knows much about them, but the ones that really stick through are the ones that had to lead through a crisis. And crisis, major change, significant things that happen in your company, that may be 1 out of 100 days. Maybe it's not going to happen real often, but how we lead in those times really is going to make it's going to make concrete how we are remembered as a leader and how people follow us. So in that section, I talk about dealing with resignations, dealing with having to let someone go because of a bad attitude or because they're not aligned with the company values. I talk about what do you do when you've got emails flying back and forth and you're angry and you're upset and you are letting off steam in an email. How do you back down from that? I talk about the pain of growth and the stages of failure that we can go through, that if we go through the right way, we can learn from and come out on the other side. If we go through the wrong way, we're destined to repeat those failures. So that kind of gives you a summary of Fairness is Overrated.
So, Tim, you did an excellent job of taking us through and giving us a great idea of what the book's all about. Now I'm going to ask you to take it even a step further. And that if the reader can only take away one concept, principle, or action item out of the entire book, everything you just discussed with us, what would you want that to be?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. I've been thinking about that ahead of time, and I think probably the thing that I would most want the reader to walk away from is that it's possible to be a leader, to be the person in the number one chair, whether it's in a department or in an entire organization, and not be a ego-driven, narcissistic leader. It's possible to be a humble leader and to be very effective. And I talk in the book about being a leader that asks questions versus one who walks around with all the answers. That takes a humble leader. It takes a humble leader to realize that he or she is not always the smartest person in the room, to lean on the information that others have, the expertise that they have, to realize that you'll be hiring people on your team that are much better than you, that are far superior than you in some areas. And that takes a humble leader. I think it takes a humble leader to realize that that there are others on the team that can contribute just as well, and to become a listening leader. I think that's really important. It takes a humble leader to learn from their failures, to admit when they have mistakes. And those things aren't intuitive. Those things are skills that we have to learn, we have to practice, we have to study. It's one of the things I'm hoping people come away from with this book.
So, Tim, this next question might be a little bit awkward because I don't know if anyone's ever asked you this before, but do you have a favorite quote from your book? Something that you wrote, and a lot of authors can kind of, when their book's been out for a longer period of time, they can kind of cheat and go on Amazon and look at what's been the most highlighted section from the customers. But do you have a favorite quote from your book, and will you take a minute to explain it as well?
Yeah, you're right. I've never been asked to quote my own book, so I'll give it a stab, though. I think somewhere in the introduction, I write about this, that the success of a leader will rise or fall on the decisions that he or she makes about the people around him or her. In other words, the people that we bring onto our team will make a huge difference about how successful our organization will be, how successful our personal leadership will be. You can be a kind of a marginal, inexperienced leader, and if you make good decisions about the people that you hire, the people that you invite into your organization, and you could come out very strong. The opposite is true also. You can be a great leader, an amazing leader, someone with lots of experience, with lots of proven track record, and you could take your eye off the ball and not pay attention to the people that are joining your organization, not making sure that's been handed off well. And it can really tank fast, that the culture can become toxic very quickly.
We've found that, people have told me before, I own a couple different companies, and they told me that that negativity can be cancer in a room. And I think that's almost an understatement. I think it's really that stage 4 kind of cancer, and it's amazing that the second you get rid of it, how quickly the environment changes.
And sometimes we don't even, in fact, usually I would say we don't realize how cancerous it is until we remove it. And then we're like, people will say, "Oh, I can't believe you finally, saw the light on this." And other staff will say, "Oh, I was thinking about leaving the organization if she or he was going to stick around." And so we find out just how toxic it really was. And information flows better downhill than uphill. So a lot of time leaders don't get the information. They don't know how bad the damage is being done by someone further down in the organization, because the people are kind of, they just don't want to share that with the leader.
So Tim, I have to ask, are you a big reader yourself?
I do like to read, yes.
So this next question will fit in perfect. I love to ask entrepreneurial authors this kind of information. So, what's one book you would recommend based on the way that it's impacted your life, helped you move forward?
Yeah, when I think of that, I think of a recent book. It may not be the most impactful, but it's definitely the one on my mind because it's most recent. Is a book called Multipliers by Liz Wiseman. Came out, I don't know, maybe 2 years ago. And she had a co-author too, which I apologize, I can't remember his name. But what really impacted me on the book Multipliers, and basically, the premise of the book is that you can either be a multiplying leader, getting the best and the most out of the people that work with you and for you, or you can be a diminishing leader, and you're, without even knowing it, you're diminishing people. You're not getting the best out of them. You're reducing their capacity. And she talks about specific ways with a lot of stats and studies behind it. But it just really kind of, I felt like, because I was reading that as I was writing this book, I felt like it just kind of went hand in glove of the type of leader that I want to nurture around me, as well as the type of leader I want to be, as one who really multiplies well, brings the best out of the people that work with me.
Excellent recommendation. I haven't got it before, and actually I looked it up so I could find that co-author, and it's Greg McKeown, the recent author of an extremely popular book in 2014, Essentialism.
Yes, that's right. Thank you.
So Liz and Greg, fantastic. This might be one of the first times I've actually seen this.
Well,
Got fantastic reviews and a ton of them. I'm gonna have to see if I can grab Liz on to discuss it as well. I'm so shocked I haven't heard of it before. Well, very good. So Tim, thank you for that recommendation. I'm someone I love. You just got me. I'll probably have this bought before the end of the interview, and want to start diving in. But before we depart, can you recommend the best way for our listeners to not only get more information on you, but also get more information on Fairness is Overrated?
Sure. Yes, fairnessisoverrated.com is probably the quickest and easiest way. Of course, your favorite bookseller, whether it's Amazon or Barnes & Noble, would have it as well, or local bookstores as well. But fairnessisoverrated.com has a lot of information, has some quotes about the book, has a free chapter, sample chapter, some nice endorsements, as well as a section with 6 or 8 different places that you can order the book.
Excellent. Well, Tim, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your brand new book with us.
Well, thank you. I really appreciated this opportunity.
Thanks again for listening in today. If you'd like more information on Tim or his book, Fairness is Overrated, check out the show notes at the elpodcast.com. And as always, if you would like a copy of his brand new amazing book, check out the elpodcast.com and click Become a VIP.
Looking for your next book idea? Head over to the elpodcast.com, where Wade shares his amazing resource, the top 10 business books recommended by over 500 entrepreneurs, with you for free. That's the elpodcast.com. Till the next time, keep it on the EL.